Now that we've reached the unofficial end of summer, I'm going to take a look at my garden and reflect back on what are some of the things that really worked, some of the things that maybe didn't, and just some of the plants that I think have really been outstanding this year and have really put on a beautiful show of color. So let's go ahead and take a walk through my garden. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and my garden is located in West Michigan. We are a Zone 6A. And this is my house, this is my home, and I'm so glad that I'm able to share my personal gardens with you, to show you my successes and my failures and just some of the very beautiful things that we have growing in our garden. So let's go ahead and take a walk. We're first going to take a look at some of the annuals that did outstanding this year. Typically, I put a lot of annual color in the front of the house because this is the part of the garden or the yard that everybody drives past and sees. So to bring a lot of color to the front of the house also just brings a lot of attention to the front of the house as well. So when I'm choosing the plants for this area, I want to be very selective with what I'm choosing, knowing that they're going to look great all summer. Now, one thing I do that I don't have a lot of control over are the front pots that flank the front of my garage. Every year, the plants that go in these containers are the new for 2025 or the new for the following year annuals that we get from Proven Winners as samples. So they're right up front, and I'm looking at them every day so I can see just exactly how well they do and what I think. So it is mid-September right now, and man, these Supertunias have done beyond my wildest imagination of how good they could do. So what are they? We first off have the Tiara Pink, and the Tiara Pink, I'm going to call it a monster, just meaning it's a very aggressive variety of Supertunia. Beautiful color. I love this kind of bicolor look with that bright pink with that kind of a white center there. It gives just a really nice shadow look. And you can see we have it paired with the Tiara Blue, which is another great kind of bicolor looking bloom with that bright royal purple, again with that beautiful white eye. The pink and the purple, they paired so wonderfully together, and look at this, they trailed all the way down to the bottom of this aqua pot. So very aggressive, excellent for trailing, and just a mass of beautiful color. So we did stuff a lot of plants in these containers, meaning lots of varieties. So I think we only had one or two of each of those petunias in this container, and you can see they just exploded with color. We also put some of the new Wedgwood Pink Angelonia, and they're kind of getting pushed out of this container, but I am loving the beautiful color there of the Wedgwood Pink. Next year, when we grow these, I'm going to use them as a thriller in my containers, plant them in the center of the pot, and let those really be the spotlight or the center focus in the planters. Tucked in the back, because we knew it probably would be pretty aggressive, we have the new Coleus. This is the Mini Me, which is a series, and Chartreuse is a color. Beautiful Chartreuse green foliage, and this is one plant back here. This plant definitely has a lot of vigor and puts on big size in a container, as well as in the landscape. We've seen it also just do amazing. One plant covers a lot of ground. So we always like to do a Supertunia to border the sidewalk. We've kind of shaked it up from year to year, and a lot of times in the past year or two we've done the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry, which I love. This year though, we let my daughter pick, and she chose the Supertunia Bubblegum. We've had bubblegum up here for years, and she says, "Mom, we need to do bubblegum again." So we went ahead and planted the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. Here is 5 plants that are planted in the ground. We do kind of a pot in a pot thing. We'll put a link to a video below to show you what I mean with the pot in the pot, just so you can get a better idea of what it is that we do. But this is just a sea of color, bright, beautiful bubblegum pink petunia flowers. These get watered by drip every day, and we fertilize them once a week. So definitely feeding your annuals will keep them looking fabulous all summer long. In the background, we have another pot that we put the Supertunia Tiara Blue in, and we also put that in there with some of the Super Bells Coral Sun. You can see the Coral Sun really is only poking through in a few places with color, because the Supertunia Tiara Blue is just so vigorous and has done fantastic in that aqua pot. We also put in there an Emerald Isle Alocasia, and it's done pretty good, although the ones we've planted at the greenhouse in those pots got a lot larger and did a little bit better. But this one could have been, actually now that I'm thinking, this one could have been a smaller pot to start with, so that's probably why it's not as big as what we've seen out at the greenhouse. Now, I know this is basic and this is just kind of ordinary, but we really love geraniums because they really have a beautiful color. Now, as I'm looking at these closely, Rod would probably be embarrassed that I am showing you these right now because he hasn't been out here lately, and it's not his job, but he likes to come out and deadhead the plants, and he hasn't been out in a while, so these geraniums do need a little deadheading. But even so, I mean, they're just such a beautiful color. This is the hot pink geranium that we carried, and we have that paired with the Superbell's Pink Lemonade, and those two planted together have done really well this summer, and I'm really enjoying the look. So they're in hanging baskets that are lit. You can see up at the top there those white bells. Those are lights. So in the night, when those lights turn on, especially like when we're in the house, it looks like the lights are pink because of all the flower color. It just reflects in the light and illuminates as pink. So that's really pretty to see. Also here, we'll go in and take a look at what I call my special pot, which is kind of my planter that I put together every year. I always kind of take some similar plants from year to year that really have done well. This year is probably my least favorite with how this is done, and I've used a lot of these plants before and they've done really well, but this year is just, it's looking a little lackluster. We used the Begonia Pegasus, which is a great foliage plant. We used fuchsia. This is fuchsia fireworks or firecracker, and it looks pretty. I mean, the blooms are nice. We use fuchsia, and by we, I guess I should say me, I use the fuchsia autumnal. I love the color of that. It's got pretty flowers, pretty foliage color. I did a few of the Begonia Bossa Nova White, which are pretty. And then I did the Senecio Angel Wings, which clearly this did not like being in an aquapot. It's not looking good. So if I look at each of these plants individually, they all look nice. But putting them all together, for some reason, they didn't play nice together. They didn't look good in the end. And it did look good in the beginning. And that's one thing to say with containers and hanging baskets. Like when you plant them in the beginning, they have a totally different look than what they'll have later on in the season. Not that one look is necessarily better. We'll just say one look is different than another. So this is a more shadier area. So this is kind of the one area I can use more of our shade type annuals. These planters here, they look gorgeous for most of the summer. Right now they're looking very tired and tattered and just not looking very good. We got a lot of rain at some point and it kind of just made them kind of not look good. And I don't know. One plant that is doing well though, this is a new salvia for 2025, and this is the Salvia Unplugged White. Beautiful white flower spikes. This was an excellent thriller in this combination, and the hummingbirds loved it. I didn't know how much the hummingbirds would let go for the white, but they really did enjoy it. And this plant does have a nice habit, even though in these planters here, because the rain kind of cracked them, they don't look super great. But I do promise these have done really well, especially in the ground planting at the greenhouse. We've got the Bobo Hydrangea, and we're going to see a lot of Bobo Hydrangea in my garden because, man, when this one came out, it was most compact at that time, and I wanted something more compact. Bobo gets only 3 to 4 foot tall and 3 to 4 foot wide, so it was the perfect size for this place in my garden. Now, there are more compact varieties at this point, so would I replant that with something different at this point because there's shorter varieties? I probably would, but at the time Bobo was my best option, and really it looks good. Here we have the Arborvitae, the Anna's Magic Ball. This is the only thing in my garden that is evergreen in the winter, and when these were first planted they were just cute little 12-inch balls, but they've been in this garden for several years now and have created just a mass of chartreuse foliage underneath my lilac tree. And this is a big lilac tree. It's so beautiful in the spring. quick-fire hydrangea, one of the earliest hydrangeas in my garden to start flowering, and it looks fabulous even here late in the fall. This was blooming in July, and it held its color really nice this late into the season. Almost nicer than the bobo that we're seeing along the hill here. Now, in Bobo's defense, look at the grass. The grass is also kind of brown and dry, so these did not get enough water, and that is why we're seeing a lot of that browning on the flowers, because there just wasn't enough water to keep them looking fresh. We have some butterfly bush planted between them, part of the Pugster series. This is the Pugster Blue Butterfly Bush, and this was looking great all summer. You can see all of the spent blooms. So that was a lot of flowers when it was blooming, and there still are a few fresh flowers here remaining. And the thing I like about butterfly bush is they're just so fragrant. They're lovely to walk and smell as you're walking through the garden. Making our way to the back of the house, there's a few things that always stand out as I make this corner, and it's the Alstroemeria. This is Alstroemeria Inca Ice, and this is the longest blooming perennial in my garden, and also it's just such a vibrant splash of that peachy color. Alstroemeria make a great cut flower. They can last up to 2 weeks in a vase, so definitely something that if you're looking for a great cut flower garden, Alstroemeria would be high on the list. Now, I'm going to say this plant has been discontinued, but there are other great Alstroemerias that will be coming out next year, so we are excited with a few new introductions that will look equally as pretty as this Inca Ice. Underneath the deck, we don't have a ton of shade in our garden, so we try to utilize the shade the best we can. So we packed this area full of hostas, and you can see it's fall. Things are starting to look a little tired. Some slugs have gotten to them. You can see there's some brown tips, which could be some cold damage, or it could just be they're just tired. Hydrangeas are also something that I think are great in the garden, and this one here is the Limetta hydrangea. You can see we left the blooms on here because even though it's done flowering and past its prime, the blooms were still looking pretty nice. Now there's a couple of them that are starting to go brown, so it is starting to look again tired, but for the majority of the summer when it was done blooming and in its prime, this hydrangea was looking fantastic. Glamour Girl Phlox. So this is a tall phlox, and it's a reblooming tall phlox. So you can see the gardeners gave it a little trim, and it is just ready to bloom again. Beautiful hot pink, or kind of a corally pink bloom. This one over here, you can see there's a lot of fresh new growth and some bright pink coming. So I think if we stay warm enough, I'm going to have a pretty vibrant splash of color from this tall phlox. And that's one thing I like to tell people is get in your garden, and anything that is done blooming, give it a light trim. Just trim maybe a quarter of it off, a third of it off, or just below where your blooms are not looking good, because a lot of plants in the garden will rebloom and give you more color even later on in the season. Here we've got lavender. This is the Sweet Romance lavender, and we planted this as kind of a front of the border here in this garden. And this had bloomed a little bit earlier. We gave it just a small little light trim, and look at it. Lots of beautiful lavender blooms here later in the season, and it's so pretty. I'm watching a bumblebee right now and talking about reflecting back on the garden. I think, you know, with all of these beautiful flowers and such, to watch the pollinators in the garden, it's beautiful to see nature and God's beauty and how everything just works so well together. Grasses are a staple in my garden for fall color. I don't have a lot of them because they do take up a lot of space, but I do like to have some good grasses in the garden. And this one here is called Morning Light. It's kind of pretty here as the sun's setting, shining through it. Morning Light, I like this grass because it has a really nice habit to it, and it's so pretty. It's a very late to bloom grass, so oftentimes I will never see plumes on this particular variety because we'll just get too cold before the plumes initiate or start to emerge. So Morning Light is fairly narrow blades of grass, and there's a little bit of creamy on the outer edges of each blade with green in the center, and it's just Grass is great for adding motion into the garden. It's always important to have that element that adds a little motion to the garden. We're going to head on over to what I like to call the circle garden. And this circle garden, I think what I like about this space is it's simple. We repeated maybe 4 or 5 varieties, and that's all that's in here. Not a lot of confusion because there's just a few plants that we're focused on. The main one, or what we'll call the thriller in this planting area, is the limelight hydrangea. So the limelight hydrangea here is actually in tree form or standard. So it's been pruned so that it has a trunk like a tree, and then all the flowers are hanging out there up at the top. So that's late season color. Our early season color comes from this plant right here, which is a lilac. This is a bloomerang dwarf purple lilac. So this blooms in the spring and then blooms on and off throughout the summer. We also have beautiful variegated foliage of the Monet Weigela, and in the spring this blooms with pink tubular flowers. Once those flowers have faded and are gone, we have the beautiful foliage all summer long. So I love the foliage here of the Monet, and you can see how we have red sun patience, and that really kind of pulls out that pink. And each of those plants next to each other, I think, really accentuate the color of the shrub next to the annual. Now, when we went to plant this garden this year, we didn't put up enough of the red sun patience, so we had to supplement with something. So this year, this is a new variety for us. This is a begonia, part of the Selenia series, and this is Selenia yellow. Just a nice soft yellow. It blooms all summer long and really doesn't need hardly any deadheading, or none at all, in fact. And it stays very clean looking here in the garden. And that too, I think, pairs really nicely with that Monet Weigela. We also have Atlas Rose in here, and the Atlas Rose is cycling right now. So you can see all of these spent blooms, which are just a ton of them. That's how many flowers there were. So now it's cycling, creating some new buds. So hopefully we may still get a little color from the Atlas Rose a little bit later on the season if we continue to stay warm enough. Heading out to the butterfly garden, which this I would like to say is my daughter's garden. So when the kids were little, this is where our swing set and sandbox were. And as they got older, they decided that they didn't need the swing set and sandbox anymore. So we wanted to kind of recreate this space kind of from like a childlike view. So butterflies, you know, children love, adults do too, but children love butterflies. They love to watch the butterflies in the garden. So we created this space into a butterfly garden. So a lot of the plants in this space are butterfly attracting plants, and we did put a few hydrangeas in just to give a big pop of color, but this is our butterfly garden. I apologize for the background noise. My neighbor is mowing right now, so we're hearing a little bit of putt, putt, putt in the background from his lawnmower. So what do you put in a butterfly garden? Well, you're going to put plants that attract the butterflies, of course. So what are some of those plants? Well, echinacea are a great plant for butterflies, our coneflower. And you can see right now there's no flowers left. There's just a bunch of spent blooms. I like to leave these here though, because the songbirds, especially the finches, they like to come and gather seeds from all of these seed pods. So we'll leave these here as long as we can, and just let the birds enjoy all the seeds that they can gather from this cluster of flowers. We have white sun patience that line this garden bed, and we do that because I love how it frames in the garden bed and also creates just a beautiful glow in the night. Some more bobo hydrangeas looking very pretty. So some of you had asked about a video I did a couple years ago where I trimmed all my hydrangeas back to about 12 or 18 inches. This is one of those that went through that drastic trim, and look how beautiful it is now. It only took not even a year for it to go from the 18-inch trim that I did to full grown again. So every once in a while it is beneficial to give your shrubs a good hardy trim, and that will create more branching and more flowers, better flowers. Sometimes it takes a year or so for them to kind of recover and get back to size, but once they do, it's rewarding. Here's another butterfly bush. This is Miss Molly. I love Miss Molly. The color is just so pretty, and butterfly bush have that amazing fragrance. So fall color that really impresses. Anemone, that is one of those plants you can plant with the intention of having great fall color. Here is an example of an anemone. This is Fall in Love Sweetly, a very compact form of anemone. 24, maybe 30 inches tall, beautiful pink double blooms, and a great iconic plant that says it's fall, y'all. Sonic Bloom Weigela putting on just a few little reblooms. This shrub will bloom 2 to 3 times throughout the season, the first bloom being in the spring, and then the second and third bloom being throughout the summer. So this is kind of a very late bloom, but nonetheless, it's giving us a little color right now. Agastache, this plant has done fabulous all summer. This is another long blooming perennial. This is the Agastache Queen Nectarine. And the thing I like about Queen Nectarine is it's got these beautiful kind of peachy orange blooms. But as we pull back a little bit, the calyx on them look rosy pink. So from a distance, you're seeing shades of rosy pink, and as you go in closer and look, you're seeing shades of beautiful peachy orange. This is a favorite of the hummingbirds. Really anything with a tubular flower is going to be a type of flower that the hummingbirds are going to enjoy. And I like how I have this one just kind of mingled in. There's a lot of milkweed kind of around it, but this one really gives a beautiful, long-lasting splash of color, being that it's a very long blooming perennial. So milkweed is a staple in a garden if you are looking to attract the monarch butterflies. So this here is milkweed. This is Asclepias cinderella, and it looks tired right now. It looks a little not great, but I'm okay with that, because if I want those monarch butterflies, I need to have the proper food source, and this is definitely going to be the plant that's the proper food source. The seed pods are starting to crack open right now, so I could come out and gather some of those seeds if I wanted to put them elsewhere, or if I didn't want them to kind of spread through my garden. But that is how milkweed is, let's say, propagated, is through seed. You collect the seeds, you plant them up, and you'll get more milkweed in your garden. A very easy plant to get lots of in the garden and or share with a friend. Oh, the delphinium's blooming. So delphinium is more of an earlier summer bloomer, a tall plant, and this one had cracked off in the wind in July or so, and so we trimmed it back, and you can see it's giving us a few late summer blooms. This is one of the truest, bluest plants in the garden, are delphiniums. The Firelight Hydrangea. So many of you have told me that you have purchased Firelight Hydrangea because of seeing it in my yard. I would love to know, are you one of those that have bought Firelight because of this video or because of the videos I've done? So Firelight is in its absolute prime right now in the garden. Oh, this thing is so gorgeous. It starts off with crisp, clean white blooms, and as those flowers age, they take on this beautiful magenta color. Firelight is about, it's about 7 foot tall or so here in my garden. And this is another one I've trimmed back to 18 to 24 inches just a few years ago because it was getting big like it is now, and I wanted to kind of refine the size. Well, it didn't take long, and it's right back up there again to the really nice full plant. Let's go in and take a closer look at these blooms because they are just so fantastic. Look at that bright, beautiful magenta. This is one of the benefits of living in the north, is that we do get fantastic coloration of our panicle or hardy hydrangeas late in the summer. For those of you in the south, I believe it's just too warm at night and you don't get the beautiful coloration that we get here in the north. So you get the nice winters, but we get the nice panicle hydrangeas here in the summer. We're going to head on back to the shade garden. And I had mentioned earlier that we had a little bit of shade under the deck. And this corner of the garden really is the only area in my garden where I have any amount of shade. And we pack it full of hostas. So we utilize our space for shade for hostas. Hostas are beautiful in the sense of mixing and matching. So Lots of colors, lots of textures, lots of sizes of hostas are in this garden bed. And in my opinion, that's the only way to do a hosta garden, is by mixing and matching varieties, just to create this beautiful patchwork of color. So many of you will ask at this point in the video, do you have deer? You must not have deer because your hostas look pretty good. Well, we have had a couple deer that have come through here this summer, but typically we don't get a lot of deer in this garden, so I don't have to worry about deer too bad. We do have to worry about slugs though. You'll notice there's a lot of holes in the leaves of the hostas, so from a distance they look pretty good, but my garden looks like yours. Well, maybe yours looks better than mine, I don't know. I do get slugs and I do get slug damage, so my garden is not exempt from some of the downfalls that you get in a garden. As you can see, we're making our way and we're kind of getting a little bit more sun now at this point in the garden. We're transitioning a little bit to more sunnier plants. This back of the garden is lined with hot pink sun patiens, and I love it. I love when I look out my window, this is the sight that I see, a beautiful mass of pink. So your eye is drawn back here with this intense mass of pink, and then you continue to keep looking to see what else is past the pink, like what else is blooming. So we have some more alstroemeria, beautiful pink alstroemeria. This actually has been in my garden for probably, I'm going to say 18 to 20 years. Every year, this may not be the best place because it always looks like it's struggling a little bit, but it continues to flower year after year. So this is just a staple, a beauty plant in the garden that if I were to dig everything up, this would be one plant that would move. If I would move, this plant would move with me. We did tuck a couple phlox in this bed to try to liven it up a little bit because it does seem very green. We have some hydrangeas and there's a few things in here, but I need to find more vibrant things to pack in here to just get that intense color I like. So we did plant a phlox and it's pretty much all done blooming right now. This is the Garden Girl Dream Girl, and this too is a reblooming phlox, and you can see it's just starting to put on just a little bit of flower there. Some more bobo hydrangea. And that's one thing you'll notice with the bobo hydrangea in my garden, depending on where they're at, they kind of vary in size a little bit, and that's based off of how much sun they get and how much water they're getting. So these back here are getting a little bit more of shade from this canopy of trees that's up here. So this is giving them shade until about noon or 1 o'clock or so, and then they're getting that late afternoon sun. So that's part of the reason why these are just a little bit smaller. There's more of that anemone, which is that great late summer color, and we planted a few plants of it in here. Anemone can tend to run a little bit, so make sure when you're planting it, it's in a place that you're okay if it does kind of start to spread and run. This is a perfect place for this plant. It can run kind of all at once and mingle with the various things that we have planted here. Allium is a great plant for full summer blooms. Woo, did you see that rabbit? He was hanging out. He wasn't eating them, but he was hanging out under the allium here. So this is Allium serendipity. Beautiful purple blooms when it's in its prime, but even here late in the season that it's done blooming, I think those flowers are really pretty. They add a lot of just interest or texture here into the garden. Some more hostas, astilbes that are spent. Here's another long blooming perennial. This is Coreopsis, and Coreopsis is a very long blooming perennial. This will bloom virtually all summer into the fall with these beautiful golden flowers, fairly compact in size, only about 18 inches tall or so, so not a very overly big plant. Just beyond it, the purple you're seeing is the Geranium Roseanne, which is another long blooming perennial, so a perennial that just takes the color and extends it through the season. Mounding habit. Geranium Roseanne is kind of one of those plants that can mingle in a garden, meaning like pop one here, pop one there. Just adds a fresh little airy, I guess I would say an airy splash of color. In the back there is an arborvitae that's golden, and I love that golden arborvitae because it breaks up the color of so much green going on in this space. Here's a great late summer and fall bloomer. This is a Rudbeckia. our rudbeckia, and this is Henry Ehlers. So it's tall. This is almost 5 foot tall, and it's got beautiful, just very light, airy, wispy blooms. So Henry Ehlers was a variety we carried several years ago. And in this back corner here, it's kind of seeded itself and created some secondary plants kind of back in there. One thing I will say about Henry Ehlers, because it is such a tall plant, the gardeners did tie it up for me, because typically this is a plant that's going to flop because it's just so tall. And that's kind of what's happening in the back there, is they've kind of flopped over. So I'm glad they were able to get out here before it got too floppy, tie it up so that I can have this nice upright, beautiful rudbeckia here in the garden. This is one reason why we discontinued it, is because it is such a big plant and it was quite hard to ship just due to the sheer size of it. Incredible hydrangea, still looking pretty good even though those blooms were fresh probably a month and a half, 2 months ago. Bobo looking pretty nice. Now this one here gets hit by the sprinkler, kind of weird. So because it gets hit by the sprinkler, it kind of is a little bit more floppy, I would say, than some of the others, but it's still looking pretty good. Some more of the allium. This is Allium Millennium, but again, cool interest here in the garden. So here's a fun thing. As I made the corner, I was thinking, wow, this space feels very open. Like, what is missing here? And I remember the last time the gardeners were here, I told them, please cut back my Baptisia. So this Baptisia, this is Baptisia australis, which is a native variety. This plant was huge. It was literally filling out this whole area. So anywhere where you're seeing bark right now was absolutely covered with the Baptisia foliage. So by trimming it back, I wanted to give these plants around it a little chance to get a little sunlight and just be able to try to like have a chance at growing and looking good. And I think it's helping, because this spirea here was totally covered up and just, it was so small and it was not doing good. But it's starting to bounce back a little bit. It's showing some beautiful fall color. So I'm hoping that that will just continue to put on a little bit more growth. Also, we had the sedum, and the sedum was covered up by foliage too and blocked, wasn't getting hardly any sun, and it wasn't doing much. Now you can see that it doesn't look great because of the shade that it was given, but it did give us a little bit of that fall bloom, so that I am excited for as well. This plant isn't doing good. So sometimes when I'm out walking, it's the first time I'm seeing things with you. This is actually a proudberry bush, and this plant has done fantastic year after year, and it's got beautiful berries. So I am not sure what went on with this or what is going on with it, because it looks like at least a little bit is dying off here. So what we'll do is we're going to trim this back. We'll trim it back to about 18 inches, and I'll see next spring what it does. Does it come back? If it does, great. If it doesn't, well, that just means it's opportunity to either A, plant a new one, because this has done fantastic here for many years, or B, it opens up a new spot for trying something different and something new. Got our hardy hibiscus, which has great dark foliage. Few flowers here still trying to show. This is typically blooming in August here. Big dinner plate blooms. You can see we have issues, like many of you do. We either get Japanese beetles that eat this, or we get little worms sometimes that will eat it as well. I'm not really seeing any worms on it right now, but this is probably pretty old damage as well. So here, I just, good way of showing you my garden has issues like your garden might. Tropical rose sun patiens are looking pretty good. It got down to 41 here about a week or so ago. So a few of the plants do look like, they got a little nipped by cold, but still the color is holding on. Here's some of the alströmerias. These are zone 7 and 8 alströmerias. I am at zone 6. These have come back for, I think this is our 3rd year now. And these are short varieties. They only get about a foot tall. But look at that. Zone 7 or 8 varieties growing in my zone 6 garden. That's pretty cool. foxglove reblooming. So this was beautiful earlier this summer, and it does continue to put on some beautiful blooms. So this white one is a new variety for next year. It's part of our Darwin perennial collection. In the back there's beautiful pink. I'm going to put the name up on the screen of what this one is, because right now it's I can't remember what it is. So many plants to remember, but this is definitely a must-have perennial for 2025. Phlox backlight, beautiful crisp clean phlox, reblooming phlox, nice clean white blooms. Love the white, especially in the night, and it's starting to get a little bit towards dusk here. The sun is starting to set. Actually, my whole backyard now is in the shade, so we don't have a lot of sunlight left in the evening, but this is a pretty time of night, especially seeing the whites. Wine and Roses Woodula, which is great foliage, spring bloomer, but great fall foliage. Limelight Hydrangea. This, along with that Woodula, are two of the oldest plants in my garden. So when we built this garden, I think now it was 20 years ago, and these were the first two plants we put in to kind of give a foundation or specimen in this garden bed, and they continue to do just wonderful. Thank you for walking through the garden with me this evening, looking back and reminiscing at some of the beautiful things that, some of the flowers that have just done fantastic this year, some of those long blooming perennials that have given us color throughout the summer, and those like this Firelight Hydrangea that every year just continue to put on a show and wow. If you have any questions or comments on any of the plants that we've seen in today's video, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. I personally will get to all of the comments and get them answered for you. If you're new to our channel, we welcome you to subscribe. And as always, thank you for taking the time to walk through the gardens, and I'm glad I'm able to take you through my personal gardens. Even though we may not know each other, you may be near, you may be far, I think it's fun to be able to share the gardens with you and hopefully give you some inspiration. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.